I have Dr. Allan Boesak online. Unfortunately, Dr. Boesak can't join us tonight on the X Space, but I wanted to talk to him about the whole AGOA matter, and of course, I want to talk to him about it in the context of the terrible genocide that is taking place in Gaza specifically, but also the historical colonial oppression of the people of Palestine by Apartheid Israel. Dr. Boesak had made a clarion call that the AGOA meeting that is due to take place from tomorrow until the 4th, where South Africa is hosting the United States of America, should not take place, and he asked 3 seminal questions, which I'm going to give him an opportunity to talk about with us today, about why this government of ours, when it says that it is actually supportive of the people of Palestine, goes and makes common cause with Apartheid Israel. Allan, over to you.
Well, thank you, Carl, and thank you to your listeners. It just seems to me that we are now in the 3rd or 4th week of the slaughter of the people of Gaza and other places, the West Bank and so forth, by the Israeli government. This is a government that has come into being and would never have been able to come into being or to exist for as long as it did, were it not for the very strong material and political and psychological support of the United States, which used all of its imperial power at every level and in every platform and at every occasion to protect Israel and to justify its deeds. And that has been going on, mind you, for the last 75 years. Biden knows very well, because for all of his political life, President Biden has been an ardent supporter of Zionism. One can call him a Christian Zionist in that sense, but also a political Zionist in his political persona. So for his over 40 years in the Senate, and then as Vice President of the United States for 8 years under Obama, and then now as President for 3 years, he has been very, very clear of his unequivocal support. And in this present stage of the Nakba, so the Nakba is not, for me, a thing that happened once and then it was over, the tragedy, the catastrophe that befell Palestinians as if it fell from heaven. For me, the Nakba is a designed plan for the ongoing extermination of the Palestinian people. And what we are seeing now over the last few weeks is just another phase in that same catastrophe executed by Israel with the help of the United States, without which help it would not have been possible at all. And so if you put that as the framework, Carl, and you remember that what happened on October 7, the action by Hamas, was therefore not an isolated event. It was the ongoing resistance that we have seen in 87, the first Intifada, and then the second Intifada, and then the March of Great Return, where Israel slaughtered hundreds of unarmed, non-violent protesters at will in ways that shocked the world. But I mean, shock is not even a word that we can describe anymore. So we've seen all of that. And so when you see this liberation struggle unfolding, then what you see is the remarkable resilience of the Palestinian people. But what Biden and the United States set out to do with Israel is to not just try and break the will to freedom and the will to self-determination. and the right to return to the land of the Palestinians. They are actively helping Israel in its genocide. Keep in mind that in the first week of the bombing, Israel threw more bombs on Gaza than the United States has thrown on Afghanistan in a full year. Try to wrap your mind around that. Now we see where we are. We've come to a point where Israel was not just bombing every single day and every single night, killing hundreds of people at a time. It was also bombing, targeting schools and hospitals and churches and mosques, telling people to evacuate. And as they were evacuating, fleeing from the place, but then they were bombed another time by the Israeli Air Force from helicopter gunshot and so forth and so forth. So Biden knows all of this. South Africa knows all of this. There's no way that President Cyril Ramaphosa does not know that this is happening. So my question is, how in God's name can we then, as South Africans, having a special relationship with the people of Palestine, knowing how the Palestinians supported us in our struggle, knowing how Nelson Mandela made it clear that South Africans will never be completely free until the Palestinians are free. Knowing all of that, that is the makeup of our relationship with the Palestinians. But knowing all of that, Cyril Ramaphosa has uttered a few pious words that in my view go nowhere, are absolutely meaningless, an insult, because the moment he utters those words, those very words drown in the blood of Palestinian children, and he knows that. Knowing all of that, he still thinks it is appropriate for this country to invite Mr. Biden and his delegation to talk about business that would benefit South Africa. I mean, with the same money that he sends to Israel to kill Palestinians, he thinks that money must come here and save our lives. What logic is that? Without that, he knows that standing now with the Palestinians is something only symbolic, that we cannot stop the war like Biden can. When Netanyahu cut off the water and the electricity and the internet, and Biden then realized that this was just too blatant, this was just too cruel. I mean, then he began talking about babies in incubators as if the babies in incubators did not exist when the bombs were falling on the hospitals, and he kept quiet. So for me, Biden then saw, but the world was reacting too much, and he told Netanyahu, stop this, reconnect the electricity, let the water flow, don't do this. And Netanyahu did that immediately, which shows you that if Joe Biden wanted to stop this war, one word from him and the war would have been over. One word from him and the slaughter would have been over. One word from him and the killing of children would have been over. He's never spoken that word. In fact, at the UN last week, he vetoed a resolution that called for peace. And so he's not interested in peace. He's not interested in the lives of children. He's not interested in the ongoing existence of the Palestinian people. He's not interested in a just solution. He's not interested in anything. Why are we standing in public with such a man? And as I said in my statement, shaking the blood-stained hand of Mr. Biden is shaking the blood-stained hand of a man who supports genocide upon the Palestinian people. South Africa deserves better. And I don't know why our president does not have the logic of mind, does not have the principle, does not have the compassion, does not have the basic understanding politically that this is not the kind of image South Africa wants to send out. And this is not, certainly not, the kind of reflection South Africa's people want the world to see of themselves. And these are the things that I object against. And it is spineless to make the excuse, yes, but arrangements have been made long before. Circumstances can emerge in any situation where you have to be able to say to somebody, I'm sorry, but the invitation cannot go through right now. There are certain things that now have priority. Cyril Ramaphosa does not make Palestine a priority. His connections with America and with whoever else Biden brings to the table, and his connections with Zionism abroad and with Zionism in South Africa, and his connections with Zionism and Apartheid Israel are more important for him by far, than his solidarity with Palestinians and his sworn duty to uphold the will of the South African people who he represents. So when he stands there, greeting Biden, acting as if we are friends with war criminals, I cannot identify myself with that. South African people do not deserve that kind of insulting image. And so it is in that context that I thought this thing should be called off, the forum should not be held, and our government should have the courage to say to Mr. Biden, I'm sorry, Mr. Biden, not this time, not at this time, not until certain things happen.
Thanks, Allan. So would you say that it would be correct of the South African people to insist that AGOA doesn't go ahead, and if it goes ahead, we as South Africans must make our voice loud and clear, picket at the AGOA meeting, and expose the South African president and also the United States of America for the way in which they continue to allow the genocide that takes place in Palestine right now?
I would say it's absolutely necessary for us to raise our voice in any way that we can. There was supposed to be a march today in Cape Town, and then we heard at a very late stage that the permission for the march had been withdrawn. So now it's turned into a picket. I will still be there, as I'm sure that hundreds of people and perhaps thousands of people will be there today to express these sentiments. We have to make clear that whatever Cyril Ramaphosa is doing or not doing, he's not doing it in the South African people's name. He's doing it for himself and perhaps for a small coterie of his friends, his fellow capitalists and businessmen who have benefited and who benefit from the Zionist connection and from the U.S. connection. But he has not done anything that the South African people have demanded. We have demanded close the Israeli embassy. We said recall our ambassador from Israel, send all the personnel of the Israeli embassy out of the country, like Bolivia has done. Bolivia has just done this week. Bolivia has done so. Why can't we follow Bolivia's example? We have said cut all ties with the apartheid state. Other countries are doing so. We have said back the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign. So that would be the clear signs that we could do, actions that other countries in Europe and the United States and Canada will not do, but we can. It's not within our power to stop the war, but it is within our power to do whatever we can to send an unequivocal message to the Israeli government and to the United States, who backs them, that this is not acceptable to us. And so to make our voices heard at this forum, should it take place, even if the pressure is on Biden and he himself does not come, that does not change the picture, in my view. That does not change the dynamics of the situation. That does not change the truth of our protest, that we must let them hear at this particular time. Now is not the time for South Africans to dilly-dally or to debate these issues. For us, it's just to make sure that the government make sure the government takes our demands seriously, and if they do not, that they at least know of the displeasure of the South African people, and that in these things they do not represent us.
Allan, you said in your statement that you made, why does the South African population still allow a president and a government that behaves in the way it does to continue to be in power? Do you want to expand on that sentiment that you have expressed?
Well, it's clear to me that the time of Mr. Ramaphosa and his coterie of criminals ruling this country has long expired. They should go. Now, there are all sorts of actions taking place in the country toward a national convention. There are political parties being established. Many of these organizations coming up now intend to contest the elections next year. If that is the only option, because I do not think that the ANC all by itself is responsible and courageous and virtuous enough to recall this president. I do not think that the ANC has it in its power or in its veins. There's not a single blood or drop of courage in those people who can do this, to call President Ramaphosa to account, to call the people around him to account. So the people must do it. We must find ways of making sure that next year's election, the African National Congress does not return to power. So how that's going to happen, people must work out for themselves. People must know in their own logic that 200 small political parties all on their own is just splitting the vote of the opposition, and in that sense almost strengthening the African National Congress. And those who are in power, like the DA, who will be happy to go into a coalition with an ANC that is no longer the strong party it used to be. And what are we going to do about that? And so it seems to me that clear thinking, setting aside of small differences, holding on to what is principled and what is fundamentally binding us together, from domestic issues to international issues, those are the things that we must think about when it comes to the elections next year. And that is a way of making sure that we can grab a hold of our country before we go over the cliff and steer it maybe on a safer, more democratic, more inclusive, more seriously logical path. And by logical path, I mean a path more in line with the ideals of our liberation struggle that we have fought, but that the people in power seem to have forgotten completely.
Dr. Boesak, I think we must really thank you for also addressing the critical issue of unity amongst the progressive left in South Africa, because you're quite right that this myriad of small political parties and divisions are not going to help us. So I want to thank you for making a call for unity amongst the progressive people of South Africa, because it is only united that we will be able to get rid of this sellout ANC government. It is on the basis of divide and rule that they will continue to stay in power. And our duty is now to put our egos, our small differences, as you say, aside, and to bring unity amongst ourselves to form a minimum program of progressive action for fundamental economic change and move forward. I want to ask you one last question.
Yes.
And that is about AGOA, because you raised the concern about AGOA taking place in the context of the genocide that is being committed in Palestine, and the central, in fact, the most critical role that the United States play in allowing this to continue. But there's also another matter. Do we, as South Africans, want to have this special relationship with imperialist United States of America, while we are moving more and more into a multipolar world, while we should build relations with the BRICS countries and also the expansion of BRICS, should we at this stage, as Ramaphosa and his cohorts are doing, prioritize this so-called special relationship with the United States of America?
That is a very important question. And the short answer to that question is clearly no, we should not be fostering a special relationship with imperialist forces engaging in the destruction of third world countries all over the world in an ongoing war, country after country after country. We should not be aligned with countries like the United States, who are the open sponsors of new colonialist and settler colonialist projects like the one in Israel over against Palestine. We should draw a line. I mean, there is such a thing as weighing one's economic interests, and one should. But along with every economic decision that we make, and along with every foreign policy that we make, there should always be the moral question. Not just, is this in my interest, but is this morally right? Will this, in the long run, contribute to building the right kind of character of our nation? Shall we be known to be leaders in thinking differently about all these things? Will the interest of the poor in Brazil or the poor in other parts of the continent of Africa weigh as heavily for us as the interest of the poor? Right now, AGOA is built on the principles of neoliberal capitalism, which has proved a disaster in this country ever since the ANC embraced it, which is what they inherited from the old apartheid capitalist system. They then took it, they refined it. All they did was bring a little color into it. It was then white capitalism with white hegemony and white interests and white connections with white imperialism. Now it is black connections to white imperialism. What are we doing? Taking sides with people whom we know were the colonialists in our own situation, are the current new colonialists in Africa, like France and other European countries, and an imperialist power that has nothing in common with our ideals and our understanding of who we are as a people, like the United States. And so these are questions that we must ask, and we are a member of BRICS. We are almost a founding member of BRICS. We came in on the second round of BRICS. Now BRICS is expanding. There are, 43 nations waiting to be joining BRICS. We should be giving leadership in BRICS, Carl. We should be giving African leadership in BRICS. We should be sitting down with other African countries talking about the best ways in which Africa can make a contribution to BRICS. Don't leave it all up to China and Russia. We have a continent with immense talent, with immense human and social capital. We have a continent which is the richest continent in the world as far as minerals are concerned, including those specific minerals like rare earth that are so absolutely necessary for the new age of economic development in the world, connected with eco-justice. We have those. And so it seems to me that the voice of BRICS is a growing voice. The voice of the West is a crumbling voice. American empire is crumbling. Look, the G20 met just the other day in Indonesia, in India. Where was Cyril Ramaphosa? Cyril Ramaphosa was at the G20, a black hanger-on of a fading white Western world hegemony. On the other side of the world, in Latin America, was what was called the G77, but it's no longer precisely the G77. It's now 134 countries that come together, representing almost 75% of the population of the world. and with the vast majority of those countries being African countries. What is South Africa doing in a white conclave of fading white Western imperialist colonialist power, where the upcoming power of freedom of non-aligned countries, almost like the old non-aligned movement, where a new kind of understanding of the world is developing, not a unipolar world, but as you say, a multipolar world, where the shift in economic power, where the shift in political power, in terms of diplomatic power. Look what Russia and China had been doing in the Middle East. Diplomatically, South Africa should be on that side. So we are consistently making the wrong choices. And it seems to me that the ANC is too weak to turn away from these wrong choices. The ANC has too little moral backbone to understand that we are on the wrong side of history, and the ANC has too little political logic left to understand that logically, politically, we should be looking the other way and acting the other way and using our influence the other way. And so if there are people in the African National Congress left who think about these things in other terms than Cyril Ramaphosa and the coterie of people around him, this is time for them to step up and to stand up and to join the voices of the people of South Africa who can see the world shifting and who can feel the shift of the tectonic plates and the shifting of the paradigms of political and geoeconomic thinking, and understand South Africa now stands at the cusp of a new movement, and that we have to make new choices for the new era that we were in. The old way of thinking, that's over. That's done with. And capitalism is coming to its crashing end, as it should. We should be in a position where we do not only understand the changes, Carl, but that we take a hand in how the world is changing.
Thanks, Dr. Boesak. And indeed, as you say, we should not just be in a position where we understand the changes, but we must be active in the process of bringing those changes about. I want to thank you for your clear voice and also for the clarion ethical positions that you've been taken over so many years. We needed to hear your voice louder and clearer than what this system in South Africa has allowed. You've in many ways been silenced. You referred to me when I spoke about your call about AGOA, that not one of the mainstream news channels have approached you to hear this very, very important call that you've made. So thank you for having shared this with us, and thank you for having left with us the challenge that we must act. Tomorrow also at the AGOA meeting, when it starts, that we must be there, picketing and protesting, letting our voice be heard. And I wish you well also in the picket that you're going to join now. Once again, thank you so much for giving your time, and thank you for the life that you have dedicated to liberation and to justice in South Africa. We're hugely in debt to you. We're very grateful for the incredible role that you have played in our liberation struggle. Thank you so much, Dr. Boesak.
Thank you, Carl. And the very, very, very best wishes with everything that you are doing.